It's free power.
Got it. There's a whole bunch of different things that can be clicked off, and you got to go through a bunch to find it. Okay, we're looking at surviving and thriving in troubled times. In the evenings, I've been looking at Daniel chapter 11 with you, Bible prophecy. I would guess that some of you haven't heard that. Check with some of those that have been here. It might be something you want to check up on. All right, you can go online to our website, you can get a book, DVD, whatever. I would strongly encourage you to understand the material we've been presenting in the evening. And in those presentations, it has been showing that we could be exceedingly close to the coming of Jesus Christ. Now, what do we need to be living like to be ready? And good news for the young people that are here and those of you that are young at heart, I use a lot of stories in worship services so that young people can enjoy it. All right? So I'm actually an outdoorsman. I like rock climbing, whitewater rafting, caving, and I've done a couple of 1,000-mile backpack trips, and I still do lots of shorter ones. So I've learned a lot about survival. And when I was a kid, I discovered something probably somewhere around 5th or 6th grade. It was Reader's Digest. And they have this thing called drama in real life. And when I read one of those, I realized that's a regular feature. And my mom didn't want to throw out Reader's Digest years ago. And she had this whole cabinet in the basement full of Reader's Digest. And I went through there and I just started reading drama in real life, you know. And what I didn't know was I was learning how to survive when it was my turn to be in those kind of situations. And we can learn a lot from survival stories, but what I'm going to show you is the characteristics of physical survivors also have a spiritual parallel. And by teaching what gets people through survival situation, you will be learning about spiritual survival. Number one, we know that attitude is the key to survival. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to those that love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. I know that God can take anything and use it for good. He's used the worst that's ever happened to me and the worst that I've ever done for good. Now, everything can work together for good. Philippians says it this way, "For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness as always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit from my labor. Yet what shall I choose? I cannot tell. For I am hard pressed between the two." Now remember, it's between living and dying. It's a hard time to pick which one he'd rather. "Having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better, nevertheless, to remain in the flesh is more needful for you. And being confident of this, I know that I shall remain and continue with you all for your progress and your joy of faith." And then verse 29, "For to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake." Wow. The first thought that passes your mind when you start having trouble is, praise the Lord, I've been granted a privilege of suffering for Jesus. That's what Paul was saying in verse 29 there. Wow, what an attitude. They said, "Paul, renounce your faith or we're going to kill you." Praise the Lord. What do you mean, praise the Lord? We said we're going to kill you. Yeah, the next thing I know, I'll be with Jesus. Praise the Lord. Then we're going to throw you in jail. If you like dying so much, we won't kill you. We'll just throw you in jail. Praise the Lord. What do you mean? We're going to lock you up. Yeah. Are you going to put guards there to make sure I can't get away? Uh-huh. Praise the Lord. Huh? Well, you said the guards can't leave. I can share the gospel all day long, and they can't leave. And it says in Nero's own household, people were being converted when Paul was a prisoner. And so they let him loose. He's causing too much trouble as a prisoner. And he went out and turned the world upside down for Jesus. How are you going to discourage somebody like that? Man, we need to have that kind of attitude, don't we? What they know about survivors is they have the right attitude. You see, they asked Admiral Stockdale, the highest ranking prisoner of war surviving in the Vietnam War. And he said, attitude made all the difference between those who survived and those who didn't. There were those who came in with an overly optimistic attitude. They said, you know, they're going to get us right out of here. They're going to come get us. We're going to be home by Christmas. And Christmas came and Christmas went, and they were still there. And another year came and another year went, and they were dropping. They were dying off. Others said, we don't know when, we don't know how, but someday, somehow, if we hang together, they'll get us out of here. Those are the guys that did all kinds of tremendous things, helping each other. And I don't have time to go into what they did, but if you read the stories, it was impressive. They hung together. And you know what? We need to stick together. We don't know when, we don't know how, but Jesus is going to get us out of here if we stick together with him. We need to be thinking the unthinkable. 1 Thessalonians, they were just reading that one. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. Things will not always continue as we always thought and are used to. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Can you remember back when Obama was new in the presidency? Yeah. I remember there was a news flash in the morning I heard on the radio. Obama had just been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for talking about peace. And I thought, when they say peace and safety, and you know what? It was during his term that the papacy called for war for the third time against Islam. We might already be headed into it, folks. We need to think the unthinkable. Things will not always continue as they are now. If you're ever around law enforcement or military people, you will realize soon that they don't always think the same way. They're always wondering what could go wrong, and if you've got a military person that had a full career in the military or somebody that's law enforcement, odds are really high as they walked into a place like this, they calculated what they were going to do if something went wrong in here. Yeah. That's the way they think. They'd been trained to think the unthinkable. I was with a group of officers that got together for lunch. It was kind of fun to watch the guys that got there late. All the seats facing the door were taken. Somebody had to sit down with their backs towards the door. They did not like it. I mean, it was very evident as they were looking around and trying to figure out anywhere but that seat with its back towards the door. They're thinking the unthinkable. And you know, friends, as Christians, we need to know our world will be turned upside down, and we need to be ready for it. The 10-80-10 at the bottom says this: 10% of people will panic in a crisis situation and do what is dangerous for them and others. 80% will kind of go numb and wait to be told what to do. 10% will do what is good for them and for others. I want to be the 10% that does what's good for others and for myself. We should be thinking ahead and have a plan in our head, since the Bible's told us the stuff that's coming. Okay, let me illustrate. I was teaching rock climbing. And I teach rock climbing the teens so that they can do something really kind of spectacular and have something to brag about without going around a corner too fast or doing drugs or alcohol or something like that. But, you know, rock climbing seems really dangerous, but as long as I'm in charge of it, I can manage most of the risk. But we have this kid. And I'm on a climbing tower before we go out on a cliff, and I'm teaching them to rappel. All you have to do is hang your heels over the edge and lean backwards over nothing. You have a rope hooked into your harness, but that something about leaning backwards over nothing is just hard on most people. And once you get used to it, it's kind of fun. Actually, you know what you do when you're on top of a cliff that has an overhang right at the top? You get over there, you look over the edge, and you calculate how far you have to get before you come in. You get about that much loose rope and you jump. That way you swing back underneath. Because it's really hard to go around that corner otherwise. But hey, once you're used to it, it's not so bad. And so this kid, he's not used to it. And he's looking at me and he says, I can't do this. And I said, yeah, you can. While I'm hooking him in. He said, no, I can't. Yeah, you can. I said, okay, you just start going backwards, let a little rope through. And he didn't notice it, but on the figure 8 that's sliding down the rope that he's hooking to, the rappel device, every time he slips any through, I'm sliding my hand down with it. I'm stiff-arming him. I'm not letting him back up. And I'm taking him over the edge. And we get him almost down where the rope's touching, and he's, yeah, you can. Because as soon as this rope touch is down, it gets a lot easier and it's going to be fine. This poor kid, he's panicking. And it's okay, you're about to make it. And the rope touches down, it should get easy. He's just out of my reach, I've let go of the rope. And he says, I can't do this. I said, yeah, you can. He says, I can't. I said, it's a lot easier down than up from there. And he says, I won't do this. And he reached over to unhook his harness. He was going to walk away from it. He just checked out with panic. And thankfully, he was within my range. And I grabbed his rope. I didn't have a tether on that day, which I should have had, but I didn't. And I was able to swing over the edge and kick him as hard as I could. I kicked his knuckles on that harness buckle. And it peeled his hand off the buckle, and the pain brought him back to reality a little bit, and I was able to get out of reach before he could grab me. Because you see, I don't care if he lets go of the rope. I've got a guy on the ground, all he has to do is pull on that rope, and this guy's not moving. But if he unhooks the harness, there's nothing I can do for him. And I hooked in another rope, and I went over, and I hooked into him, and I got this guy back up. He was not getting out of my reach. And so we got him off of there. But that's what happens when we panic. We don't think through what we're doing. Lots of people just go numb in a crisis, and they wait to be told what to do, or they try to do what they normally do, even though it's not a good idea. Yeah. There was a lady in London. There was a subway fire. Smoke is billowing up out of the subway, and there's an escalator going down into the smoke. And she's trying to get on to the escalator to go down into the fire. And a police officer blocks her from going down. She says, get out of my way. I've got to get on that train. He says, lady, there won't be a train. I've got to be on that train. Every day, I've got to make that train. I've got to get to work. So, lady, you'll die down there. And she's trying to get on the train. This is how you get little old ladies walking through a battle zone with people shooting, and they're on the way to the market to get bread, because that's what they do every day at this time. They're just doing what they normally do. But we should know what God wants us to do and be an example to those around us, because somebody needs to tell some of these folks what to be doing. Story listening is crucially important. 1 Corinthians 10. This is why I didn't know it, but this is what Drama in Real Life was doing to me in Reader's Digest. I was reading stories, so when it was my turn, I would understand. And I would have something in my brain to know how to do it. Now, all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed, lest he fall. No temptation is overtaking you except such as common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. We have stories in the Bible to tell us how to do it, right? Remember Captain Sullenberger? Miracle on the Hudson? His plane is taking off. He's got the co-pilot in control during takeoff. They hit a flock of birds. It knocks out both engines. The voice recorder reports Captain Sullenberger saying, "The aircraft is mine." Huh? That just means he's taken over flying this thing. Now that it has no engines, he's flying it. You do not want to lose both engines on takeoff in a metropolitan area. Not good. Far better in the country, but he's not in the country. He takes over, he tells his co-pilot, go through the restart engine procedures. And they radio in that they've lost both engines. They clear him to land at a nearby airport, and he responds negative, "We're in the Hudson." Was he in the Hudson River yet? No. But he made some quick calculations in his brain, and according to his calculations, he may not make it to that runway. And if he fails, he kills everybody on board and people on the ground. He doesn't like that. He likes the odds better of putting it down in the Hudson River. He thinks he might be able to save some lives. So he puts it down in the Hudson. Now, folks, you've got to pull that landing off right if you want a second chance. If you come in with one wing too low, even if there are crosswinds, and there were, it grabs that wing, rips it off, and puts the airplane in cartwheels and rips it to pieces. If you come in with the nose too low, submarine doesn't work so well. You've got to drag your tail, drop both engines in at just about the same time with the wings, and you can be okay. He pulls the perfect water landing. Nobody on board was hurt during the landing. The only people that got hurt were those that slipped on the wet wings waiting for the water taxis to pick them up. It's pretty good. A few days later in New York, another airplane went down. It was a bad month. It crashed in the houses, killing everybody on board the passenger commuter jet airplane and everybody in the houses. What's the difference? Well, Captain Sullenberger has a hobby, so to speak. He read disaster stories for airplanes. And he was always playing in his mind what he would do if it was his turn. And so when it was his turn, he didn't wait to be told what to do. He did what he believed and knew was best. The other pilot, unfortunately, did not even follow procedures. You see, the procedure is when you're flying this type of a commuter plane in icing conditions, you take it off autopilot because autopilot will crash the plane if it's in icing conditions. A human pilot can fly it okay. He left it on autopilot, and it crashed the plane. Which pilot would you rather fly with? How about the only one you could fly with? Yeah. Story listening is important. Also, so is trusting in God. Psalm 23, verses 4 through 6. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Did that just promise you that if you follow Jesus Christ, nothing will go wrong? No. It said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I've been there with my own family members. My own daughter died in my arms. But God was with us. He's with you when you are the one facing death. He will always be there. And when Paul was facing death, he was surely goodness and mercy. Man, he was ready for it. Yeah. Next thing I get to know, I'll be spending eternity with Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. And so many of us are afraid of prophecy and end-time events because we're afraid. Friends, if you're afraid, that means you need to focus more on Jesus Christ, because it's Jesus that died in the middle. It's Jesus that walks beside his people that get caught in the middle, and it's Jesus who rescues his people. We don't have to be afraid. We can be trusting in Jesus Christ. Besides, if you've given your life to Jesus like Paul, whatever happens, God will use it for good. Praise the Lord. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego acted that way in Daniel chapter 3. You see, they were told that they were supposed to come out in the plains of Dura, and there was this huge image of gold set up, and when the music played, they were supposed to bow down and worship this image of Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar was sitting there waiting to watch everybody worship his image. And when the music played, if you didn't bow down, you'd be thrown in the fiery furnace. And when the music played, they all bowed down except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And when everybody bowed down, they really bowed down. You know, it's the kind down to your face to the ground, bow down kind of stuff. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing there when everybody else is face to the ground. Think anybody's going to notice? I think so. And they get called to the king, and the king looks at them. Oh, you guys, you're the ones that were 10 times smarter than everybody else. You must not have heard the announcement, because you're smart enough to know that you don't want to be going in that fiery furnace. So guys, we'll play the music again, just for you guys, and this time make sure that you bow down when the music plays. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could get an award on knowing how to offend a heathen king. They basically tell the king, King, don't bother with the music. We're not doing it. Here's what they say. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you set up. Play the music if you want, king, but we're not doing it. He got mad. He said, heat it up 7 times hotter, as hot as you can get it, and throw these guys in. And they tie their hands and they tie their feet, which means Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego aren't going to go jump in the fire by themselves. They're going to get thrown in. And by the way, they had pit furnaces out on the plains of Dura, which means one soldier grabs them by the shoulders, another grabs them by the feet, and you get only as close as you have to get to throw them in, and you throw them where they bounce off the edge and down into the pit. And the soldiers that throw them in fall over dead at that distance. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego bounce down in there. The ropes burn right off of them, so they stand up, dust off, and start walking around in the fire. The king looks down in the fire and sees them get up and start walking around, and his soldiers are dead out there on the side of it. But he's up on a throne where he can see in. He turns to his advisors and he says, hey, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? Why do I see 4 and the 4th looks like the Son of God? He watches it for a bit. He says, hey, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come back up out of that fire. I want you to notice he didn't call Jesus out. Jesus can stay in there. That's close enough. What if you're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? If I'm them, I'm not sure I want to get out of the fire. A little bit ago, they tried to kill me out there. They are not coming in here to get me. This is a safe place. And I'm with Jesus. Hey, when you're with Jesus, you're in a very safe place. All right? And, you know, I'd look at Jesus and say, do I have to go out there? And Jesus says, I think we've got his attention now. Yeah, it's time to go. And they get out there. And they're checking them out. There's no burns. You know, have you ever reached by a candle on the table and got some little hairs on the back of your knuckles, and it doesn't smell so good? I was, heard an explosion. I stepped outside the building I was in, and there was a metal business building beside me, and I could see a mushroom of fire and smoke going up on the other side. Went around the corner of that building on a run, and I met a man staggering towards me. Skin was hanging from his arms and face. Thankfully, he'd got his arm over his eyes, and so there was one strip that wasn't burned across his eyes. Well, actually, it wasn't charred burned, it was a flash burn, which means it just made blisters and popped them in an instant, and the skin from the blisters was just hanging. Wasn't pretty, and it didn't smell pretty. His hair, you've seen the cartoons where their hair is kind of singed and blown straight back? His hair was burned mostly off, and what was left of it was ashes down the back of his shirt. Didn't smell pretty. That was a flash of fire. And he was in shock. I had to talk him out of getting a mop bucket and filling it with water to wash off in until the medical team would get there. That's not what you want to do using dirty water on open wounds like that. And he didn't know any better, but these guys, I mean, they're checking them. There's nothing. Really impressive. Trust in God. What we know from survivor studies is that survivors actually, those that survive have a higher probability that they're trusting in God. There's a book called Deep Survival, and an atheist wrote the book. But as he's interviewing survivors over and over, he kept hearing this spiritual component, and by the time he was done with his research, he had to admit in the book he was actively considering becoming a Christian. What they also know from survivors, or from studying people that are in terrible situations, they were studying aircraft carrier pilots. Now, they have a rather stressful occupation. They're landing on moving runways. The runway is moving away from them. But it's not only moving away from them, it's moving up and down. If you doubt it, you stand on the end of a large ship, a cruise ship or something, and look the length of the ship and watch the other end of it against the horizon. You're landing on a runway that's moving. And they have all kinds of jokes about ways of killing yourself on a landing. They land full throttle, hoping to catch a hook on a cable. And there are several cables that they try to hook. If they miss the cable, they have to be going fast enough to take off again. If they get the cable, they go from flight speed to stop, just like that. It's a rough landing. And they have all kinds of jokes on the ways they get killed. You see, you have to name your fear to control it. So they name it in jokes. But the research really is there's a better way. You name your fear in prayer and give it to God. And then if you want to joke about it, go ahead. But you've got to name your fear to control it. Being alert and situationally aware. 1 Peter 5. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Be aware, folks, Satan is not your friend, and he is out to destroy you. Lady was jogging in California, and unfortunately, mountain lions haven't been learning their lessons very well. You see, for years, it was known that mountain lions don't attack human beings. Then mountain lions stopped teaching each other that. Now mountain lions attack people quite often. And this lady was out jogging when suddenly she was hit from behind. A mountain lion had her, and his jaws were on the back of her head as she was driven face down. And she can describe how it felt to have its fangs scraping against her skull. She can describe the breadth of its on the back of her head and her neck, and the feel of its fur as she reached around behind and was petting the mountain lion. You think, huh? Oh, yeah. She was feeling for its eyes so she could gouge them out. And that mountain lion decided it wasn't worth lunch to lose its eyes. He was sliding his fangs down her neck. She only had a few moments because when he gets to her neck, she will be dead. She got to the eyes first. She's a survivor. Be aware, Satan is out to get you. Isaiah, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Whenever you turn to the right hand or whenever you turn to the left. Be aware that Satan is out to get you, but even more importantly, be aware that God will speak to you. Yeah. Learn to listen. Some people say, oh, I've never heard God. Yes, you have. We've all heard him. We may try to ignore him, but we've heard him. You've never heard, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. Now you need to ask forgiveness. That's the Holy Spirit working in your life. That's God speaking. Now learn to listen to it, and he will tell you all kinds of things. Okay. I was headed home from school in high school. I think it was the first time I really heard God speak to me. I mean, really clearly, other than don't do it, okay? Now, I walked across the campus of Andrews University, hit Westwood, goes through a neighbor's house, yard I mean, not through their house, and I go around behind the house, go down a hill, cross the creek, and my house is down in the valley. Now, it's like a quarter-mile home from where I'm playing floor hockey if I go that way. If I go around, it's a 2-mile walk. You know I'm going through the woods, okay? It's 10 o'clock at night. We've got a trail. I have permission to go through the neighbor's property. And it is really dark and wet out. It's March in Michigan, but it's a warm night. It's about like outside today. And so I'm walking along, feeling for the trail, and I've got my arms in front of me. The reason arms, there are saplings just off the edges of the trail, and if I get off the edge, I do not want a tree in the face. But if you bump a tree at night in cold weather, in wet, you take a cold shower. So I am very slowly working my way, making sure I know where the trail is. I do not want a cold shower. Meanwhile, about where the front pew is, there's this rabbit that goes hop, hop, hop. He's not worried about me. He doesn't even know I'm there. And I'm thinking, okay, this rabbit's just doing whatever a rabbit does at night, but he's headed this way. I know the trail comes along, goes by this giant tree, turns and goes down and turns that way across the creek. And I'm thinking that rabbit's headed right where that trail is. I wonder if I can get to the rabbit. How close can I get? And he doesn't know I'm here. So I'm even going quieter. And I'm coming by the tree when all of a sudden a voice goes off in my head. Tim, say hello, you are not alone. Huh? Say hello, you are not alone. I am all alone. You are not alone, say hello. I'm arguing with a voice in my head. This is not good. Say hello, you are not alone. I am alone. The rabbit doesn't even know I'm here. And if the rabbit doesn't know you're here, why would he know somebody else is here? Say hello. You're in real trouble when you start losing to a voice in your head in the middle of the night. And I'm thinking, I am all alone. And then I start thinking, you know, if I'm not alone, I could hide behind this tree. I think, oh man, I'm losing it. I am alone. There's nothing to be afraid of out here. There's a rabbit. Not afraid of a rabbit. Say hello, you are not alone. It would be foolish to say hello. If you're alone, nobody would know it. Say hello. Oh, I'm still losing to the voice. Okay, I'll say hello. Do you know how hard it is to say hello to nobody in the middle of the night? Hello? Before I could get behind the tree, I was blinded by a very bright light. What I didn't know is I had walked up to about 15 feet, like from here to the pew, to an armed man laying on the trail waiting in ambush. He was facing the other direction, waiting for somebody from the other direction. I don't know if you know this, but it's not a good idea to ambush a man waiting in ambush. And luckily for me, he chose to light me up with a searchlight he had in one hand versus the revolver that he had. And he wanted to know who I was. I wouldn't wanted to know who he was. He was on our property. I will only say this, the guy with the gun has an advantage. And I couldn't see who he was, and he had me lit up. He identified himself quickly. He was a game warden. You see, the creek was a salmon spawning stream, and we were having trouble with poachers. He was waiting for a poacher. And so he identified himself, and that took care of my question on who he was. And he gave me a business card. Actually, I called about a week later, and he got his poacher a week later. And I was tired of the poaching going on in our front yard. And so that worked out for both of us, but I will tell you this. You close the distance to under 15 feet, like 5 or 10 feet away, and your odds of getting shot are going way up. I'm glad I listened to a still small voice that said, "Tim, say hello." I'm not so sure how still and small it was, actually. I was arguing with it. You know why? One of the reasons he didn't know I was there? He was listening to a rabbit that I was hopping straight towards him. And he was wondering how close the rabbit would get to him before it noticed him. We were listening to the same rabbit. Whatever. But learn to listen, because God will speak to you. God has told me things several times during life, and sometimes it's changed somebody else's life and they accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. We've got to learn to listen to be more effective for Jesus Christ. Flexible preparedness and the new normal. 2 Timothy 2:15. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightfully dividing the word of truth. We need to know what we believe, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. Friends, you've got to know how to give a gospel presentation. And if you don't know that, at least get presentation number 1 from our series, and they have some of them out here, and go memorize a gospel presentation. It might change your life in the process. But that's one question you've got to be able to answer. Then it says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end is the way of death. We can get so sure we're right that we don't listen to God. We're so sure we're right that we don't change when we need to change. Flexible preparedness. I nearly killed myself and a team of 8 by not being flexible. You see, I like caving. And I'm a cave guide in a place called Fitton Cave in the Buffalo River National Park in Arkansas. It's a cave with 18 miles of passages. Took a picture of my brother as he got through the narrow part of the Needle's Eye. That is not the narrow part. The narrow part just before that, you know, he just got his helmet back on. You slip your helmet off, and for a guy, ladies, some ladies at least, have a little easier time. I can't go through like this. I've got to go through like that to be small enough to get through. And just on the other side of the Needle's Eye, I mean, that's huge. That's my brother on the other side. And it's kind of neat looking territory there. Look at all the stalagmites, flows, and stuff like that. Beautiful back in this cave. And, you know, the ceiling's full of neat stuff. And there's my niece standing beside what is called the bridal veil. Brown, muddy dirt and stuff. And you get this white, crystally, sparkly stuff that comes out of it. Fossilized starfish and plant stems and all kinds of neat stuff. Getting parts of the cave. To get down there, you've got to rappel down a 50, 60-foot cliff. And, you know, it's this kind of neat stuff back in there. Well, I'll leave it there for a moment. I was taking a team in team of 8, counting myself. You have to have at least 4, no more than 8. 4, so that if somebody gets hurt, you leave somebody with them, and 2 go out for help. 8 max, because they don't want anything really wearing on the cave, so they want small groups. The cave is, I get a permit good for a 24-hour period. I go in, go on the 4-wheel drive road, stop about 2 miles away. There's a little metal pipe with a slot in it. I write out the names of everybody in there, when we're going in, when we're coming out, drop it in. They know I'm supposed to be going in that day. They can stop by and check that and see what time I'm supposed to be out. And if I don't leave when I'm supposed to be gone, the cars, they send a rescue team after us. It's that kind of a place. And and they're used to me. I do lots of caving trips in there. And so this particular day, I knew it wasn't advisable to go caving. There were flash flood warnings out. But, you see, the cave's not a problem. We're going in a high entrance. There's a low entrance where the streams flow out. We're way above water level on this thing. I'm not worried about getting caught in flooding inside the cave. But to get to the cave, I've got to cross a creek 3 times. Flash flood warnings. Could be interesting. But I figure if it's flash flood warnings on Saturday night, I'm going to hit the first crossing at about dawn on Sunday morning, sunrise. And so if I can get across the creek at sunrise, then a second crossing and a third crossing, and we're going upstream, so it should be getting less and less water as we go. When we come out 12 hours later, it should be no problem. Yeah, we're underground 10 to 12 hours. And it's pack it in, pack it out. If you have to go to the bathroom, you pack it out. And so we get to the first crossing, and the water's running kind of hard. Instead of being ankle deep like it normally is, it's running about this deep, and it's whitewater. I will tell you, that's about as deep, well, that's deeper than you really should cross in whitewater. But I hook a rope to me. I've got a caving rope, nice dirty rope for use in a cave. I tie it off to my waist, and I tie it to a tree on this side, and I've got a buddy belaying, and we cross the stream. I cross the stream. I pull it tight on the other side to another tree, about 8 feet above the water level, really, really tight, and my team crosses the rope on a Trolley and Traverse bridge. Get everybody across, we head upstream. I left the rope. I have a plan. If things go bad, I've got a way across the stream. You see, if there's 3 crossings, that tells you the cave is on the opposite side from where we parked. I only have to cross once, and I'm on the same side of the cave. Or coming back, I only have to cross once, and I'm on the same side as my car. So I've got a bridge. Go to the second crossing. Now, this is in December, mid-December. I think it was December 16. And so it's not really, really warm out, but it's not too bad. And we cross the second one, and 2 of us take turns carrying them over because some of us were wearing quick, dry pants, and some were wearing blue jeans. And some of you know what that means. In the Northwest, we have a saying, cotton kills. In bad weather, if you're wearing cotton, it can kill you in hypothermia situations. So those of us with fast dry pants, we carried them across. It's kind of foggy and drizzly, but not too bad. And we get to the third crossing across there. We go inside the cave, open the cave. It's a combination lock. Open the barred gate door, drop your group through, pull it shut, and lock it. And we're in. Yeah, we lock yourselves in. And everybody in the group knows the combination because I get hit on the head, they have to know how to get out. And partway into it, we hit something called the manhole. It's aptly named. It's a hole about that big around, and you've got to go down through it if you want to go to this certain part of the cave that I want to go into. And it's kind of like a giant toilet bowl. It's smooth all the way around it, sloped into the manhole. And so I just slide down into it, brace my foot across the opening where I can sit there and work, and I hook a rope. The goal is to hook a webbing ladder onto a little stalagmite there beside it, and then drop the ladder down, and you got it made, and your whole group can follow you. And just as I was reaching over to put the loop over the stalagmite, I slipped, and I went down the hole. Now, it's only about 10, 15 feet drop. That's further than you really want to go. But there's a problem. I know that dead center under the manhole is a stalagmite. I don't have to look around the corner. I know what's coming. And I do not want to hit that stalagmite. It's not a big one. It's only about that tall and about that big around, and thankfully it's got a nice rounded top. It's still going to hurt. And there's another little chunk of rock there on the edge that I grabbed as I went through the hole, and it extends my arm up really nicely, slams me up against the edge, cracks a rib, rips my hand loose, and I hit the ground beside the stalagmite. Yeah, I made it. What do you do for a cracked rib? Nothing. Just wait for a few weeks or a month or whatever it is till it quits hurting. Yeah, not the first one. And so you just know you're going to be sore for a while. And my group says, "What happened?" I said, I slipped, but I got the rope ladder in place. Come on down. So they came on down, and we're looking at all this kind of stuff down there. We didn't get to go into the deepest part of the cave because our rope was over the creek. Came back out. It was a short trip. We were only underground about 6 or 7 hours because we lost a lot of time on the Trolley Traverse, and I knew it was going to take some time to get out. But it was after sunset when we came out. Supposed to be. And when I got into the outroom, there was a flashing light at the entrance of the cave. I thought, what are they doing sending a rescue team out here? My time isn't up. I thought, they can't have a rescue vehicle at the opening of this cave. There's not even a trail to get to the opening of that door. It was a lightning flashing. What had happened is a thunderstorm had stalled out over that mountain for about 6 hours while we were underground. And it was already flash floods. And 6 hours of heavy downpour on top of flash flood is not good. And so when I did get to the opening, not only is there lightning flashing, but there's a waterfall coming into the opening, and there's not supposed to be a creek there. And it was really hard opening the gate. I should have stayed in with my team. But I had a plan. And I was stubborn to make it because, hey, I've got dry, clean clothes, and I've got food in that car. And I've got a Trolley and Traverse, a rope over that stream. Got out of the cave. We actually had to hand the smaller ones across a roaring stream coming down the side of the mountain by the entrance that's not supposed to be there. So they didn't get swept off and over a small cliff. Oh, we got out. I got down to the stream, and I went upstream to what would have been a fourth crossing because I thought I wanted to see it on the upstream side where it could be maybe the shallowest and easiest to get across. I went alone, and I waded into the water, and I was going in that fast. And within a couple of steps, I was up to here, and I wasn't even into the current yet, nor had I got to the bottom. I was just barely into it. And I'm looking downstream as I'm standing in the water, and I'm watching this 3 or 4 foot standing wave in brush. It's called a strainer. You get swept off your feet and into that, the odds of survival are not good. And it's cold in the middle of the night, and I'm standing in a stream looking at that, and I thought, nope, not going to try crossing this. I might get somebody across, but I'm going to lose people. Now you have to know, my team consisted of myself, my 2 teenage daughters, my 11-year-old son, my teenage niece, her 19-year-old weightlifter boyfriend, and a young couple in their upper 20s. He's a contractor, she's a nurse. That was our team of 8. And so I may have even had more invested in that team than normal. with 3 of my own kids in it. And couldn't do that, so we headed downstream. And when the stream slams into a cliff, that's where the crossing was supposed to be, but there was no way, which meant we have to go up the cliff. It's still flashing lightning and raining and winds pouring. It's the middle of the night, and it's not a good time to be rock climbing with no ropes. But we prayed about it, and I went up along the edge, and we prayed that I would pick a ledge that would make it all the way across the cliff face and out the other side. And after a ledge or two went by, I thought, yeah, this one looks good. And our team went across. And we're just working our way across the ledge. It's going up on one side, down, and the water slamming 20, 30 feet below, or maybe more, into this cliff. Yeah, it's probably more like 40, 50 feet. And if you slip, you're going right into that raging water. And it's just water everywhere and mud, and so it's not great footing. We get across that one, we get to the other side, and the temperature's starting to drop. It will be snowing before the night is over. And my 10 or 11-year-old son is walking beside me, says, "Dad, I'm getting sleepy, I'm getting tired. Can we lay down? I want to take a nap." I said, "No, we're going to keep moving." And he's just whining about he wants to take a nap. No, we're going to keep moving. And on the second cliff, we were doing the same thing. When we got to the second crossing, knew it had to do the cliff bypass again. And we got to a wide spot on the ledge, and I gathered everybody around, and my son was whining quite a bit. And I said, "Okay, everybody, I want you to open your packs. I want you to take out everything you do not need to survive the night. I don't care about litter. I don't care about value. If you don't need it, you leave it. I don't want you wasting energy carrying something you don't need." I said, "If you have any food in there, any calories at all, I want you to eat it now. You need it tonight." I watched the husband and wife dig out and look through their stuff. They had an apple core. He ate half, she ate the other half. You do what you have to do. And my son, when I said it's time to go, we left a lot of stuff on that ledge. And my son said, "Daddy, I can't go." I said, "Yeah, you can." He says, "No, I'm going to stay here and take a nap." I said, "If we stay here, if anybody takes a nap, we will die." He says, "Oh." He didn't cry again all night. Nor did he stop moving. A little bit later, somebody said, "I've got to go to the bathroom." I said, "Okay. Well, where can we stop?" I said, "Are you wet?" "Yeah." "Could you get any wetter?" "No." "Would it be warm or cold?" "Got it." We didn't stop to go to the bathroom. We finally got to the third crossing where the rope was. It was gone. Actually, it was still there. The rope that was 8 foot above the water was now underwater. So we couldn't use that. And you just know there is no way you're making it across this stream. I had tried over and over to find crossings. I'd carried people across side crossings, and my legs were really shot from the cold and the wet. And I gathered everybody under what was left of one poncho. It was what was left because we'd gone through one patch of greenbriers after another and just ripped things, and our clothing was ripped. And I put them under there, and I stood outside, and I had my caving light, and I was standing under this giant oak tree with no leaves on it, and flipping my light back and forth, because any self-respecting rescue team will come to a flashing tree in the middle of the night. And I was only, 200 or 300 yards away from where my car was. But I couldn't hear a sound above the rushing river of any kind of rescue team. I should be able to see lights if they were over there, but I'm not seeing anything through the trees. Somewhere around 1 or 2 in the morning, I gave up on a rescue team. I've got to get my team moving, or they're going to die waiting for rescue. I said, guys, there's a fire trail on this side of the stream. It goes up the mountain. I said, 13 years ago, I went up that trail, and there was a collapsed cabin up there. I don't know if it's still there, and I don't know if it's standing. But I think we should try. And I convinced them all, because we couldn't leave anybody behind. I put the contractor, the upper 20-year-old, in the lead, and just said, follow this trail, there's no turns. I'll pull the rear. Twofold reason. One, I'm pretty good at motivating people who want to quit. I've had a lot of practice out in the mountains and rivers over the years. And the other one is, I didn't know if I could make it. I was the old guy, but that wasn't the real reason. Cracked rib. I'd been in and out of the water more than anybody else had, and my legs were numb. And I wasn't sure how long they were going to keep working. They felt like lead. But I believed that I could keep going because I put my mind to it. And if I went down, I intended to crawl. But I wouldn't stop. I put them in front of me so they wouldn't see it happen if it did. But my 11-year-old son wouldn't leave my side. We kept going. A little while later, I came to the 19-year-old weightlifter and my niece, and she was literally slapping him across the face. I knew he was in trouble because I saw his backpack, then I saw a coat. You don't start dropping things like that unless you're in trouble. When you get cold enough in hypothermia, you start thinking you're warm and you don't need your coat. But I was so beat, I left his coat lay there. I knew how bad a shape I was when I left his coat behind. We kept him going. A little bit later, we had this great surge of energy when the contractor yells, "I found an outhouse!" It was a handicapped fiberglass outhouse. You can put 8 people in a fiberglass handicapped outhouse, body to body, and that's exactly what you have to do to survive. Except there didn't used to be an outhouse up there, and I said, keep going. This didn't used to be here. Keep looking. It's snowing at this point. A little bit later, he yells from ahead, "I found the cabin. Come check it out." It had been totally restored as a historic cabin in the Buffalo River National Park. As I walked up there's a sign right on the side of it that said, it's a wilderness cabin. So, they don't want it to get busted up by people. It's got a sign on it that says 6 months in jail, $5,000 fine for breaking and entering. I'm standing there reading the sign, and my daughter walks up beside me. She says, "Dad, it's warm and they have food in jail." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing." The contractor and I walked around looking it over, and we decided on our way in. They had this windows, antique rippled glass, steel wire nailed over that with wooden strips holding on the wire. We took a rock, there's lots of them in Arkansas, broke one of the wood strips, or all the wood strips, peeled the wire off. He punched a rock through the window. I reached through and opened it. He broke and I entered. We shared in it. I opened the front door and brought everybody in. It was an empty building. It was cold, but there was no wind and no rain. I started working on the weightlifter, trying to figure out what to do with him. I saw a locked closet in the corner. Well, first I looked down. There was a stairway leading into a basement. I opened the door. The basement was filling with water, and the rats were all over the stairway. I closed the door. They could have the basement. I tossed a Leatherman multi-purpose tool to the contractor. I said, "Find out what's behind the locked door in the closet." And while I was working on the weightlifter, he got the door open. He said, "Come check it out." I looked, and there's spools of wire and paperwork for rescues in Fitton Cave. The wires for communication in a cave during the rescue. said, okay. Then there were 3 sleeping bags. There was a Coleman stove, single burner, Coleman lantern, 3 lighters, a can of fuel, a can of corn, and a can of beans. Man, I couldn't have had a better wish list. I took my 11-year-old and the 19-year-old and I stripped them to their underwear shorts and I jammed them in the sleeping bags body to body in the one bag. We heated up the food on the burner and I make sure the weightlifter was conscious and he got a good chunk of it. Oh, that was really rough on him. 19-year-old weightlifter and he's the first one that goes on out. But the rest of us were vegetarian, folks. And a high-protein diet doesn't give you the endurance that a vegetarian diet does. That's why he was in trouble. And he was really high protein. And so we shared what was left of it, and then I put the 3 girls down, teenage girls, as tight against the boys as I could get them. No spaces between bodies. And there was only room to lay on your side, not on your back or your belly. You laid them on their side, covered them with the sleeping bag. I laid down against one of my daughters. Tanya, the nurse, lays down against my back. Her husband gets the outside edge. He had more body fat than anybody else. And we lay there and shook violently on the floor. And I realized I'd made a mistake. I'm laying on a cracked rib. But I'm not trying to roll over and going face to face with Tanya. And in the morning, I went outside. I was still shaking violently. It hurts to the core of your being when you're losing your body temperature. And I was listening for an airplane or a helicopter. Any sign of rescue. But they didn't know we were missing until 8 in the morning. The weather was so bad they knew we wouldn't have gone caving, and they never checked to see if we made it out. They never knew we were missing until my wife was able to get through the park headquarters when they opened at 8 a.m. Then they sent out rescue teams. 2 of which were only looking for our bodies in case we tried to cross a stream. Well, I didn't know that, and I waited, and I finally went back in to huddle up by a lantern to get a tiny bit warmer. And while I was inside, my daughter says, "Oh, something moved outside. It was white." She said, "Oh, it's just another waterfall." She kept looking, though. A little bit later, she said, "If it's a waterfall, it has a national park emblem on the side of it." That brought me running to the window, and I see a 4-wheel drive, a big, tall 4-wheel drive pickup with a crew cab on it, picking its way over the logs on the fire trail. And I came out the front door as the ranger pulls into the yard of this cabin, and he gets out of his truck wearing a life jacket to drive a truck. It was a rough day. And as I walked towards him and he walks towards me, and I said, "Sir, I'm sorry we had to break into your cabin." I mean, I'm thinking of this sign, $5,000 fine, 6 months in jail, and I'm meeting a man in uniform. But oh, was it a sweet looking sight to see that man in uniform. And he said, "I am just glad you're here. I've been hoping you were going to be here." I said, "Sir, we got into the closet and the sleeping bags are a mess. We'll be glad to take them home." He said, "You know, you don't need to worry about that. I've got a commercial washer and dryer in my house. I'll take care of that." And it dawned on me, when Jesus comes, I'm going to be as guilty of sin, and I'm going to say, "Jesus, but I'm a sinner." And he's going to say, "I've already taken care of that." He came inside, evaluated things, and he told the young man laying in the sleeping bag, the 19-year-old, he said, "Just a minute." He says, "I've got some clothes out, dry clothes out in my truck, and I've got food out there." Well, actually, he didn't say food yet. He says, "I'll get the clothing." He comes in, he gives him a pair of wind jacket and wind pants. And he says, "Now put these on, and it's warm in my truck, and I have food bars out there." Weightlifter here's warm and food bars. He pops out of the sleeping bag, grabs the clothes, and they're like flags flying behind him as he streaks for the truck. You should have seen my second daughter when the ranger pulls up in the yard. She ran out on the porch of the cabin, and she's wearing a sweatshirt for her pants. She got rid of her blue jeans. And the sweatshirt is on upside down with her legs through the armholes. And she's holding the waist because, it's a little looser. And she sees the ranger and she goes, "Yeah!" We didn't care. We were being rescued. We got to a river crossing, creek crossing, now a river. And he said, "Okay, everybody, get in the back. Put the life jacket on the little guy." You see, on his way in, crossing this crossing, the current had gotten hold of his truck. The back end swung downstream in the current. He said he hit the gas and he prayed. He nearly died coming after us. This time, he wants all of us in the back of the truck, because if he gets swept off this time, he knows we've got a better chance in the back of the truck than you have inside. And the life jacket's on the little guy. Gives us a chance, but it doesn't leave him much of a chance. We got across that, got to my car. We put on dry clothing, got our food out of there. We got back in his truck, and we went up a washed-out four-wheel drive road. The roads were now in such bad condition and under such water, it was 5 days before I was able to come back and get my car, when the water was low enough to drive it out. I also got my rope. Cleanest caving rope I've ever seen after being under that water. It took me over 7 hours to stop shaking after I was put in heat. Not that we went to a hospital. It was just the ranger's truck and in a convenience store waiting for a vehicle to take us home. But friends, I should have just stayed. There's a way that seems right, but the ends are the ways of death. It also says, "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Whatever's happening in your life, don't worry so much about what you don't have. Focus on what you do have. You can make yourself and others miserable if you just worry about what you don't have. Focus on what you have and use it to the best of your abilities. Truth matters. John 8:32, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Believing something that's not true in a survival situation can be deadly. Truth matters. And friends, as we go into end-time events, knowing God's truth is crucial. Believing something that's an error is deadly. Also, you need to be able to take a risk to live. Matthew 10:39, "He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it." Often, you have to risk to live. You heard a few of those, crossing ledges, crossing streams, and things like that. You can't just quit. You've got to take some risks to make it. That's spiritually and physically. James Eliot said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain which he cannot lose." He said that shortly before he and 4 other men gave their lives to reach the Auca Indians in Ecuador. And because of their death, the Indians became Christians. He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain which he cannot live. Okay, last illustration, caring relationships and never give up. "Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching." We need a fellowship. Also, don't give up, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. Al Haynes was flying a DC-10 passenger jet from California to Chicago. Just getting up to cruising altitude when there was an explosion in the tail engine. Didn't hurt anybody on the plane, but it sure messed up the tail. And he comes on the intercom and says, okay, folks, we've lost our tail engine, but we still have both wing engines, and we can fly this plane with 2 wing engines. Don't worry. After switching off the intercom, he tries his controls, tries to make a turn. There's nothing. He's lost his hydraulic system. He flips to the backup system, tries his controls. There's nothing. Thank the Lord there are 3 hydraulic systems on this plane. He flips to number 3, tries his controls. There's nothing. The unthinkable has happened. He's lost all 3 systems, and there is no number 4. He radios in and asks him what he should do, and they say, you can't fly that airplane without a hydraulic system. Do you want an airplane pilot that believes in giving up when he's told that? Thankfully, Al Haynes doesn't believe in giving up, and he cares about his own family, he cares about himself, and he cares about his passengers. He is not going to give up. He and some other pilots work out a plan. When Reader's Digest did the drama and real-life story of him, they said it this way: what they decided to do was about being like being in a car on top of Pikes Peak with no brakes and no steering wheel. But you drive it down by opening and closing the doors to control it. But if that's all you've got, that's all you've got. They have 2 controls that work. They have a fuel pump for that engine and a fuel pump for that engine. That's all they have. They can accelerate or decelerate those engines. It's already in a circle from the tail damage, and by adjusting the throttles, they can change the size of the circle. And by slowing the engines down, it'll slowly start falling. That's all he's got. And they calculate the circles, and they figure if by fine-tuning the circles, they can bring this plane over the Sioux City airport. So Sioux City it will be. And he's trying to bring it down as he's approaching. He told everybody that they were going to make an emergency landing at Sioux City, and he says, I'm not going to kid you, it's going to be a really rough landing. And he goes through the bracing procedures, and he and his buddies keep flying the plane. Meanwhile, there's a passenger by the name of Jerry Schemmel, 29-year-old executive. He doesn't wait for orders, he's used to giving them. And his first reaction when the engine blew was to praise the Lord that his wife wasn't flying with him that day. He's a Christian. And then he asks, Lord, help me to be of help to others today. And he goes person to person with the flight crew, helping encourage people and calming them down. And he's memorizing where all the exits are because he's got a feeling he's going to need them. And as they're approaching the runway, or the airport, flight control tells Al Haynes, you are cleared to land on any runway. Now, if you've ever been in a cockpit of an airplane coming into a commercial airport, they don't just say, you're clear to land on any runway. They tell you what speed, what directions, all kinds of things as you're coming in. Al Haynes, you are clear to land on any runway. And Al Haynes responds, you want to be specific and make it a runway, huh? He's trying to hit the airport and not the building. Why? They have disaster teams that know how to handle airplane crashes there. He's trying to bring it in at an airport. He's just cutting the throttles on a big circle, hoping he can make it hit the airport. He hit the runway right by the numbers. What a shot. But he wasn't flying in line with the runway. He was flying at an angle to the runway in the circle. And so the airplane hits, and it hit really hard like he said it would. It hit so hard the cockpit broke off and the airplane ran over it with him inside. It ripped off both wings. It ripped the tail off. And the fuselage slides across the field into a cornfield and burst into flames. Upside down. Jerry Schemmel finds himself hanging upside down in a burning airplane. He unhooks his seatbelt and drops to the ceiling, which is now the floor. And Jerry goes from passenger to passenger, helping them unhook. Those that are alive, those that are dead, he leaves. And he's moving through the plane until he believes he is the last living person on board that airplane. By the way, he gave up on emergency exits. There's one big hole on each end. And that's how everybody's getting out. He finally runs through the flames as the last living person to escape the plane. And as he breaks through the flames, he hears a cry of a child inside the plane. He turns around, goes back through the fire. Back inside a burning airplane. It's daytime, but it's dark in there, and it's full of smoke, and he can't see anything. And he begins feeling through the bodies and the rubble and feeling for a live child. He says, Lord, make them cry again. And he hears a cry. He goes to that part of the plane, but he can't find him. Lord, I need another cry. And he hears a cry, and it's coming from inside of an overhead bin, but everything's upside down, so it's on the floor. He opens it, and there's an 11-month-old girl inside that bin. She'd been ripped out of her mother's arms, flown through the air, hits an open bin. It closes as the plane's rolling and protects her from everything that flies through the plane. She's bruised, but that's it. He sticks her under his coat, and he heads through the flames for the third time. He gets outside, and he finds a mother that's in hysterics that can't find her little girl. Is this her? Yes. And they found Captain Haynes. As the rescue teams began to cut him out of the crushed cockpit, he was alive and he was awake. He said, did anybody die? And they said, yes, sir. He said, then I'm a failure. They said, no, sir, you are not. There have more people lived today than died today. And that was true. That's not bad for a plane that cannot be flown. He survived after a long stay in a hospital. But friends, a church is a lot like that airplane. And I'm wondering, those of you that are members of this church, if you would like to raise your hands and say this: I will never give up on people. I will care about people, and I will never give up on myself or anybody else in this church. Anybody want to say, I want to make this church that kind of a place? Yeah, if you're a member of this church, yeah. Maybe some of you aren't members. Anybody here want to say, you know, if this church wants to be that kind of place, then I'd like to check it out and see if it really is. Anybody want to raise a hand? Yes? 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 Yeah? Friends, I encourage you, check it out. And if you're a member of this church, make sure you're making it that kind of a place. Don't give up on anybody else, because God doesn't give up on you or them either. Jesus is coming again. And it's going to be spectacular. Let's go to our closing hymn. In a little while, we're going home. Let's sing the first and the last verses of that one. Can we do that? You can do that. Good. Let's sing that. Let's stand together.